Hi, I'm Delisi.
And I'm Chef James Rigato. And in this episode of Essential Cooking, we talk with Antoine Przekop. Antoine is a sommelier who has worked in wine and restaurants for a long time. He's recently taken on a new role as sales director for Motor City Seafood Company, a financial supporter of WDET.
We talk about wine, cocktails, and what goes into sourcing fresh seafood like octopus, oysters, and perch. Plus, we have some fun with a rapid-fire pop quiz.
You know, Antoine is one of those, I feel like you're like an Oz of the Detroit restaurant scene, because I guarantee your favorite restaurant in Detroit, dear listener, your favorite restaurant has benefited from Antoine's expertise. And you've probably consumed wines that Antoine approved or hand-selected for a list. And, I mean, you did a champagne training for our staff where that was probably the most education I've ever received out of a wine region in a 2-hour period. And I think you're probably the second place. So the next most educational experience I've had is probably you as well. And you're such a pillar of the wine community via restaurant wine menus. I mean, I'm glad we're talking right now because the average consumer would never know. You know,
right.
The average guest doesn't know where this wine comes from. I'm excited to kind of talk today and shed some light on things that maybe people don't know.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't know. I have been in the restaurant wine business for a long, long time. 15 years in restaurants, 8.5 years in wholesale, and then now taking the role as sales director, sales manager for Motor City Seafood Company, which was a startup 4 years ago, just under 4 years ago. Stacy and Matt Wiseman. James, you have, amazing connections with them. And I think we're one of the first, very early supporters of what they were doing. But they literally built this from the ground up with,
It's
five, six products. Yeah, really crazy. And now my role, because, I've worked for Great Lakes Wine and Spirits for 8.5 years. Great Lakes now has our partnership stake in Motor City. So we're partners. And they wanted somebody to help, build the sales team, but also who could, talk wine, sake, spirits, vermouth, all the things that would kind of go along. And then obviously, I've taken everything that I've learned about in restaurants in my professional life, taking that kind of hospitality aspect of the business into sales, and now hopefully, into seafood sales.
The obviously interesting thing about wine is, that it's shelf stable, right? That's the biggest difference, is that you're dealing with a non, fluctuating shelf life immediately, like fish. I mean, fish,
and
is
especially the stuff that we were selling. I mean, we had wine. We had rosé that tasted better 2 years down the road than it did immediately. But the consumer and a lot of restaurant buyers have this idea that if it's not this year's current vintage, I don't want to buy it.
Which is not
always the case. Usually, rosé sometimes comes out. You generally fresh vintage comes out before June, is in our warehouse ready to go for summer, right, for our season.
Yeah.
But those wines, a lot of times they taste way better in September, October, or even the following March.
Well, I mean,
when they've been in bottle, when they've had a chance to settle.
So that's a whole different. I feel like there's seasonality there too. It's like okay, pumpkins are sometimes available in the end of August. And then try to buy fresh pumpkins for Thanksgiving when there's already a foot of snow on the ground. It's just the seasonality around, I guess trends or what the sales kind of marketing is definitely frustrating sometimes to what the public wants to see versus pumpkin spice, for instance, doesn't have pumpkin in it. There's a lot of
pumpkin spice lattes coming soon.
Yeah, it's just
it's September 1st.
There's some really interesting things.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's some funny things between wine and fish, though, that do make sense, because it's a consumable that's often served in a restaurant setting.
Yes.
So you're selling to the same audience.
Sure.
And you're right, the flexibility of I sometimes want a whole frying fish, right? I want to score it and deep fry it, and then we're going to smother it in a green curry. We're going to do a Thai style fish. Matt will often say the New Zealand snapper is a great option for it, 1.5 pounds, perfect. Now, if I'm out of it or didn't come or they didn't catch enough or whatever goes on, he'll be you should switch to the, whole sea bream, the Mediterranean sea bream, similar sized, and it's great fried and served whole. That communication is vital. Just like when a wine will go out of vintage, you're like, hey, James, we don't have any more of this,
Right.
Chardonnay. But if you actually pour this, I got a great price in this Macon. It's like, you're going to love it. It's still Chardonnay. It's just not the new world. It's like, it's old world. It's the Burgundy. Or like even a price change. Hey, heads up. It's up. It's more, it's 20% higher. I think you can charge more because it's better. And here's why. Like that kind of flexibility in sales is what I think is going to set you apart from anybody else trying to just jump ship and go to a new career path. Because I think the way that we buy fish can be similar to the way that you have sold wine.
Sure.
Which is
absolutely,
you're basically a broker. You're an ambassador of a fish program, essentially.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways you can buy, fish in the world. And I don't think people are going to Matt because he's the, easiest, cheapest option. It's because it's nuanced salesmanship.
Yeah. And they also, there were a couple things that they did very early on, which was to be able to deliver on Sunday.
Yep.
And if people had specs on how they wanted things prepped, I mean, they could fillet, they can do whole fish, they can do head off, there's so many things that can happen behind the scenes, and offering that and offering, delivery on a Sunday when most of our other, competitors weren't going to deliver. They're like, yeah, sorry, we don't do Sundays.
A lot of those wholesalers have the fish in the cooler.
Sure.
They're just not operating.
Right.
So it's not like you're basically just like, you have the product, they just don't open for sales. And I think what's special is that historically, Sundays and Mondays are like bad days to order fish in restaurants.
I mean, listen,
Yeah.
we've heard that a million times.
Of course.
You don't go have sushi on Monday night if the place was closed on Sunday, right? Because who knows what they're doing with the stuff that was fresh on Saturday night, but Monday afternoon might not be so good, but they couldn't get a delivery or nobody called it in,
Yeah, I think and those days are thankfully becoming more and more a thing of the past.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely like, I think we're all used to the, what do you mean it's going to take 6 days for shipping kind of, mentality. I mean, the Amazon mentality of the world, right? If you can't get something quickly and nobody picks up their phone, why call them, right?
Yeah.
So,
to that point, people do have this mentality of, why can't you get it to me tomorrow kind of a thing.
right.
You're dealing with fish.
Yes.
That is not a box of Kleenex. That is,
Yeah, no, it's way beyond.
So-
Yeah.
is there very much that mentality of like that kind of immediacy when it comes to something like fish?
I mean, from what I understand now, granted, I've never worked in a kitchen. Okay, I've worked in restaurants for years.
Right.
I did everything except, I washed dishes, but I never cooked. And so I always hung out with the chefs before, after, during service. Sometimes in the mornings, I'd be there doing orders, and they'd be there prepping, doing their orders. So I don't have super hands-on experience to answer the question, but I do know from what I've heard, it's the most perishable product that comes into your kitchen, right?
Yeah, and it's probably the most, because just the nature of fish. For one, we're in essentially a freshwater landlocked area, so ocean fish, no matter what, has time on it by the time it gets to Michigan. But it also has, the chemical compounds, and there's ways to avoid it. You can obviously, the way you butcher, the way you gut, the way you air dry, or if you like, there's a lot of things you can do to fish to preserve its life. But typically, a whole gutted fish just sitting around does not age well in its natural state. You got to kind of handle it.
Right.
So yeah, if it's a day behind, or if it sits on a plane too long, it just doesn't take a beating well, as it shouldn't. It's this very time sensitive product, and things like mussels and clams are living. So once they die, that's when they go
Oysters,
bad.
yeah.
And oysters are a little more resilient. They are alive. You're absolutely right. But oysters, on the East Coast, they'll actually pull oysters out of the water and put them in a cellar for a couple months. I learned that when I was out there. That blew my mind. But an oyster can live out of water.
See, I just learned something new.
Yeah, it's bonkers. I had to make them explain. I made them walk me through it. I was like, hold on. You take it out of the water, you put it in a cellar for 2 months.
In what?
And then you put it basically in a crate. It's just like sitting there. Oysters can live out of the water for like weeks and on end.
So cool temperature, certain amount of humidity.
Yeah. It's like
and these are caves that are essentially on the ocean, right?
Yeah, this is like basically a farmer's essentially like estate, which can be anywhere from like a shack,
just
to
like wine,
an actual
right?
an actual basement. But on the East Coast, specifically Duxbury, Massachusetts, is where I was, with Island Creek. there's shallow water what will freeze. Like the ocean obviously will have like, a frozen shoreline, not solid, but like, chunks of ice that will basically beat up the oysters or the cages. It'll basically destroy the habitat for the oysters. They have to come out in the colder months and go back in the water. So the oyster can basically live, and it's almost like a bird, like a migratory bird. It knows when the season's changing and it stuffs itself, and it will live off the nutrients in its shell. Mussels, the mussels, brought like the mussels from Brittany, France are so special because of the tide change. It's like 24 feet or something. When you see the tide in Brittany, it's like dramatic. I mean, it's like you could feel like you could drive a truck out there like a mile. And then when the tide comes back, it completely submerges them. So the mussels get a complete exposure to oxygen for an extended period of time and then a complete submersion under the ocean. And that's what makes the mussels from, Brittany, France so special. Because there's tides all over the world, but that tide is dramatic. So shellfish is unique. It can survive, a decent
It's a little
amount.
more forgiving.
And lobsters ship live.
Right.
But again, all these things have a shelf life. And an oyster, a lobster that dies basically almost immediately starts releasing ammonia. So if you buy a dead lobster, let it sit around for a day, and then cook it, I mean, it's basically gonna taste like like poison, and it actually can make you sick too.
Nice choice of words, by the way.
Yeah,
poison.
Yeah, it's true. But but that's just, to me, it goes back to salesmanship, and I think what Matt does, what separates Motor City. Because you can buy a lot of nice fish. I mean, there's a lot of nice fish out there. Matt does not have the only nice fish in the world. He does have very nice fish, but you can get some nice fish out there.
Right.
But the salesmanship is what's going to set him apart, which is why I think you are the right man for the job, right person for the job.
I think it's salesmanship. It's also product knowledge, and then the other thing is like I'm not coming from like I didn't sell like football helmets for example. Like
right.
I wasn't selling widgets, and the relationships are already there. You and I are sitting down talking. My world is going to expand a little bit because we were small. I had 125 accounts. We sold to probably 700 accounts at our division within Great Lakes. Great Lakes sells to everybody who has a liquor license in Michigan. But I have relationships with those people, and I get what happens behind the scenes. So that some product knowledge, and then and we just hired a new salesperson. He's chef background, but then worked for a relatively large seafood company down in the South. They covered like 6 states, but he was in North Carolina. So he gets it too. He's like, listen, I can come in and you don't know what to do with scorpion fish. I can come in and show you what to do with scorpion fish, right? As opposed to you just buying the fish, not knowing what to do, screwing it up, thinking that we're selling you bad product and then moving on, right? And it's kind of, that whole idea is kind of like, we would go taste the wine with the wine buyer to make sure that they were happy with it, that it was going to work with their menu.
Right temperature, that's the right pairings.
And that, that's why we generally, I don't know if it's legal or not anyways, but we would normally never leave samples of wine, because if somebody's inexperienced or doesn't, cork taint's a big thing, right? Like I normally would have maybe opened this bottle before I came here just to make sure that I didn't have a bad bottle. I do have a backup, by the way, just in case. Pro tip. But you want to make sure that your customer also understands sometimes a product that they might not be familiar with, but the relationship gets you to go, hey man, okay, I need this on the menu. It's on the menu for the weekend, but like you said earlier, I don't have red snapper, but I have an alternative.
Yeah.
Here's 3 things we can do for you that would work.
Matt just brought me octopus, and he was like, hey, this is like a tenderized thing, which is not a big deal. They basically jacquard it. They basically spike it with needles, and it pushes some of the moisture out. So it's essentially like a higher yield product because it's been tenderized. Which again, like you can look it up, it's jacquarding. It's like you can actually buy them for like meat. Basically, it's a bunch of spiky needles. You just kind of like
I've seen those. I always thought that was a gimmick.
It's for octopus. It's actually it's a solid idea because it pushes the moisture out.
Okay.
An octopus, when you cook a whole octopus, like if you just buy one like whatever wild at the store, it's like you get like a 35% yield. So 60
wow.
or so 65% is water. So
right.
if you buy 10 pounds, you're gonna get like 3.5 pounds of product. It's crazy. So when you just essentially jacquard it, you kind of push some of the water out, so you get a higher yield. So he just came to me with this new like, hey, this octopus is tenderized, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he explained it to me. I cooked it. It's a beautiful product, and it's got about a 65% yield. makes more sense, obviously. So the price fluctuate. Hold my hand a little bit, explain it to me, let me taste it. Okay, now I'm all in, and it's an easier sell.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things like a chef or Matt has a chef background too.
Sure.
Because some inexperienced chefs, I think Matt talked about this with us, and if a chef says, "Hey Antoine, I want to do monkfish crudo,"
Right.
You're like,
Right.
I can't let you do that because monkfish carries, parasites. You cannot eat monkfish raw. Unfortunately, some chefs need to be told that. Even halibut. I mean, some chefs will serve halibut. I see it around. Halibut has a decent amount of worms and parasites.
Right.
I don't recommend you eat it raw. You can, do whatever you want, but I wouldn't serve raw halibut in my restaurant.
I learned that this week. It's called a histamine fish.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think
See?
There it is.
There you go.
Layering up my knowledge.
Those are some of the things that again, Motor City Seafood can kind of hold your hand through.
Yes.
I don't need to know about what fish to not serve raw, but with the tenderized octopus yield conversation was new to me.
Yeah.
So I think that again, that's really what separates salesmanship from just a wholesale account.
Yeah, I mean, business philosophy, I think it's a really easy transition, because what I've been doing with Little Guy, what I did with restaurants, now what kind of Matt has developed, that idea of we're going to have really, really great product, and we're going to know everything we can about it to make sure that it sells, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal. That idea is, was one of the easiest job transitions for me ever.
Sure.
Well, I haven't officially started, full time yet.
Theory.
But in theory, that's what kind of made me think, okay, yeah, this is a really good move. It's going to be weird being away from wine, but I might enjoy it more.
You can drink while you're on the calls.
Yeah.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
From the relationship between you, the buyer, you, the wholesale seller, James, when you're getting, your restaurant's a little different, because you're the kind of chef that could say, what do you got? Or maybe, what do you have a lot of?
Right.
Or whatever. But then there are certain restaurants who always have the Bronzino on the menu, or what have you. How does that conversation go with you? Do you say, this is what I really want to make? Or do you usually say, what is the best thing you have?
Yeah.
Or maybe for the best price, or you have too much of this and I'll figure out what to do with it.
Right.
How do those conversations go, for you or for maybe other chefs to get, and and I'm always mindful, the timing is such an issue now.
Yeah.
It's not like other foods, there's a timing issue. How's that work? How does that conversation play out so that you can ultimately make the best thing for your customer, for your clientele? And for you to be able to sell, your job is to sell as much fish as possible to people that can actually do something with it.
Yeah, for me, I definitely I cook what I want to eat, and I like to eat very seasonally. So I'm aware of when soft shell crab starts. I'm aware of when bay scallops are around. I'm aware when halibut season starts or Copper River salmon. So that dictates a lot. Matt will send out a weekly blast of what he has going on. So that's obviously very wise for him to do.
Yep.
Matt Wiseman, obviously.
Yes. Lives up to his name.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Don't tell me I said that.
Let's check his
Just kidding. But so I definitely am motivated by seasonality. But I will check in with Matt and be like, hey, is there anything you're excited about? I think it's the Alfonsina. I always mispronounce it, but the golden-eyed snapper. And we talked about this when Matt was on the air with you, Ann. Mm-hmm. The golden-eyed snapper is one of the best raw eating fish I've ever tasted in my life. Right. And he was the one who was like, hey, James, you got to try this. It looks like a crazy giant goldfish. It's the most delicious thing ever. So I bought it, and I fell in love with it. He doesn't get, I think it's like a bycatch of his New Zealand snapper people. So he doesn't really get a lot of it, but when he does, I'll totally buy it. So he knows I love it, and he knows that I'm available to buy it whenever it's available. So that kind of relationship is just like, like anything else, time. Antoine knows things about me in the wine world where he's like, hey, James loves that Vizarco cart 2012. You should buy the last 12 bottles of it. And I will. So like there's things that relationships will lean to, but I like to buy seasonally. But with all my vendors, I will check in and say, hey, what looks great? Or what do you have a lot of? Or what's coming up that I can keep my eye on? So that's definitely, you're right. Everything you just said. I mean, you're pretty much spot on with how most chefs purchase. If you do go to a restaurant and you see a fixed priced fish year round, I would just be a little leery. Like for instance, a lot of Michigan tourist towns will offer, whitefish, walleye, and perch year round. Well, perch is definitely not available year round, and perch is also pretty expensive. If you buy fresh perch right now, wholesale, I mean, actually, I shouldn't say right now. I haven't looked in a long time, but it's always in the high teens. So 18, 19, maybe 13 if it's like, a plentiful, but perch is expensive. So it's without 100% yield. You just split it down the middle. It's already butterflied for you. Okay, now if you go to a restaurant and you see like perch dinner, especially when it just says perch dinner,
$7.99.
Yeah, it's a Russian frozen fish. It's called Zander. Zender or Zander? I think it's Zander. But it's a perch, quote. It's a perch, and it's frozen, and it's from Russia. These like Russian lakes they fish it on. It's available year round. You can buy it. Cisco carries it. All the big wigs, company carries it. That's one of the biggest.
But it's not really perch.
It's perch. It's not Great Lakes perch.
Yeah, it's not Great Lakes fresh perch.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
So like to me, there's a lot of that in the fish industry. So I would always, and I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk when I go out to eat ever, obviously, but I've asked and I'm like, is this fresh perch? Yeah, it's fresh. I was like, okay, like really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, are you sure? And like, I literally was like, and I'm not proud of it. I once was like, I want to see it. I was like, go get it. Go give me the raw fish and show me. And then she came back and was like, no, it's frozen. It's previously frozen. It was this Zender. And like, I'm not against eating that product, but I'm just like, I will go with a fresh whitefish or a fresh walleye over, what I'm saying? Like, tell me what is, and honestly, most of these bartenders or servers will just tell you straight up, like, yeah, you know what, you should get the whitefish. It's the best right now. So most of these like small town, fish spots will tell you. Like, I go to Scalawags, which is this like, I'm not a big fan of Mackinac City. I'm sure the three of us aren't. It's a very touristy, fudge-driven town, and that's not really my speed. But Scalawags is this little gem in Mackinac City where they just serve up just really simple fried fish. Whitefish chowder, fried walleye. It's just good fried fish. And just ask them. Just ask the kid behind the counter. He'll tell you, a walleye came in really fresh. Get the walleye. Like, most places will tell you.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, what do you know that I don't? Who is ice fishing perch for this restaurant?
Right.
Sometimes it's like a legit, like, wait a second, I want to go down this rabbit hole. And I've been, I remember, I think when Sarah Welch was at Republic, she was the one that told me about the carrots in dirt at Cherry Capital. They will like store the carrots in the dirt over the winter and harvest them as they go. Basically you bring in like basically a trough of dirt with carrots in them.
Like a raised bed?
More or less, but it's like essentially out of the ground and it's like in a barn or something.
Cool.
So I was unaware that you could get carrots all winter long from Cherry Capital. And so like there's moments where I'm like, wait a second, explain yourself. And I'm not grilling you because I'm like mad. I'm like, no, educate me so I can then use this product as well.
Yeah.
One thing that I will do when I go out is like when I go to, because I like a gin and tonic is a great, I don't know this bar or trust this bar cocktail.
Yes.
But
we all have our benchmarks.
I've gotten to the point where I'm like, what kind of tonic do you pour? Because a lot of times, for one, gin and tonic is not a very popular drink in a weird establishment or like a dive bar or whatever. Yeah. And like I'm always like crossing my fingers that it's like a little, like the little individual 8-ounce Schweppes or like, hopefully Fever Tree. Fever Tree, but like a doubtful, but whatever, Schweppes or, some kind of small, just at least small. And whenever you see them pull out like the 1 liter and it's like a third left, I'm like, oh my God.
Or the gun.
Yeah, the gun. Honestly though, I'll take the gun for the CO2 level.
Yes.
Because like, I don't expect to get a great tonic flavor, but like it's most about the carbonation. And I go to some places and I'm like, if I get a gin and tonic, it's just like dead flat. And I'm like, ugh.
Well, so brands like Fever Tree that are really interesting. So they came out with 150 milliliter cans, but their normal size was 200 milliliters because the gin and tonic should be about 1/4 to 3/4
Right.
spirit to, and generally served in a bigger glass, right? If you get it, especially in Spain, which you wouldn't think gin and tonic.
No,
is
that's
big,
the-
but
that's the
that
drink
is
of Spain.
essentially the national drink outside of obviously wine and sangria and sherry and things like
Gin
that.
and tonic
It's the-
is the
Oh, yeah.
drink in Spain.
If you go to Madrid, every second bar has a massive menu of gin and tonics with like all these different kinds of gin, all these different kinds of tonic. Garnishes. I mean, we stayed in this incredible hotel in Madrid that they pour it into the glass. The wine glass they poured it into was probably cost more than the booze and the mixers and the garnish and the ice. And I'm like, okay, that you're getting a proper.
yeah.
So like glassware again. We go back to this. This is why not that I didn't think you would have glassware here, but I figured why not. Glassware is hugely important too.
Oh, it's huge. If you go to Jose Andres, any of his restaurants, Bazaar in Hollywood for one, I think it's Hollywood. It might just be outside, maybe West Hollywood or even probably downtown LA. I can't remember, but Jose Andres restaurants have like such a gin and tonic experience because obviously he's a Spanish chef. But yeah, I remember like it's like a terrarium of like little tiny garnishes on crazy ice cubes, and they just give you a bottle of tonic and then like the gin in a carafe, and you basically like mix it to your leisure and like it's
make
just
your own.
To me, I mean, like, but I will order a gin and tonic at a generic wedding too, and I'm not that big of a diva. I really just want carbonation and like a thinned out gin, essentially.
Right.
But I feel like there's nothing worse than a flat tonic, and a gin. It just tastes like terrible Sprite, essentially.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But
Most of it's way too sweet, anyways.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. What is you're at a wedding with a not good bar.
So it's funny. Usually gin and tonic.
Okay.
Yeah, but then now like I kind of look like, oh, what kind of tonic do they
Yeah,
have?
I know. I've never thought I'd become like a tonic diva. You could give me the worst gin in the world, but with a great tonic, I'll be like, okay, fine, I can deal with that.
But then you kind of survey, like the last wedding I went to, it's been a couple years. Most of my friends are already either married or long since divorced.
Second marriages
and,
coming in. You know
maybe
that.
second marriages. You don't always get invited to those, and you don't always want to go to those either.
That's true.
But they had Dolan. They had this dry vermouth that we sell. That's fantastic, and they were pouring pretty great sparkling wine. So I was doing dry vermouth and sparkling wine in a highball
little
kind
spritz.
of yeah.
That's nice.
Which is great because it's low alcohol too.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Somebody's got to drive
drink them all
home.
night.
Yeah.
What about you, Ann? What's your go-to? You go to a wedding and you're like, this bar is not trustworthy.
Oh, I'm like a gin and tonic.
Gin and tonic,
person.
yeah.
It sounds
All right.
the safest.
And it usually is.
It sounds like
especially at a busy
Give
bar.
me a little lime to make sure.
Yeah.
And gin and tonic for
Yeah,
me. For
especially
sure.
I like when they're like really busy because you're like, oh yeah, they're just crushing through soda and tonic, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The ice is fresh.
Yeah, everything's just busy. I
Yeah.
love a busy bar.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, so I got a couple, and I'm sure, Ann, you probably have, like I said, more intelligent things to say than I do. But I always like picking your brain because you always have great. I want to give you two choices on a couple of things, and I want you to answer me as quick as you can, and it doesn't need to be too in depth. But cheap champagne or expensive cava?
Expensive cava, like without a doubt.
All right, Pilsner or IPA?
Pilsner, 100%.
Okay. Green chartreuse or yellow chartreuse?
Okay, so I mean, if I have to,
Yeah, I'm pouring you one right now. You only get one.
it's gonna be green. Although I do love yellow,
Okay.
but yeah,
I didn't say it.
but yellow tends to me to be a little bit softer and too sweet. Whereas I like the higher herbal balance of green.
Favorite vodka?
Oh man,
I know it's a weird cut. That's probably favorite vodka is probably an oxymoron, but
that's a tough one. I mean, I don't even know. Can I answer this? Sid, are you listening? Favorite vodka? I mean, unfortunately, you might have to cut this out. It's probably Kettle One.
okay.
That's one of our competitors. I don't know. I don't like Tito's. I actually, it's not even because they're just everywhere, and I feel like they're like they inundated the market. But I just don't think it tastes very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I drink the Kirkland brand, the French Kirkland
Hey man,
brand.
Kirkland is dominating the liquor scene right now. It's crazy.
Mean,
That's the
we've done
Costco-
blind
Costco.
tastings. It's actually pretty.
No,
damn
I know.
good. It's
Kirkland
got some
Round-
texture. It's not hot.
Kirkland holds
you
their
know?
own, man. That's
Yeah,
no
you know?
question. All right,
Yeah.
McDonald's or Burger King?
Neither.
Now, come on, you got to answer.
For what?
Doesn't matter.
Filet of fish?
You and I are starving, and there's two
Actually,
places.
Matthew Wiseman said
He likes the filet of
He
fish.
had good things to say about the filet of fish.
I don't mind the filet of fish.
There you go. So McDonald's.
I mean, yeah. If I had to pick, yeah, I'd probably go McDonald's.
All right. Macon or Chablis?
Chablis, but
Right.
but it's a minefield. Okay, so I know this is rapid round, but the Chablis, when it's great, better than Macon. But there's a lot more good Macon out there and available from great producers that are just undiscovered.
Right.
And there's a lot more organics going on down in Macon than there are in Chablis. So it kind of depends. Like if I had to pick one, like we're talking Premier Grand Cru from a really kick-ass producer, like Gilbert Pique, yeah, Chablis. But it like in general, and then price point wise too, if I'm in a restaurant, like if there's a deep white Burgundy list, the Macon list, there's always going to be a gem. Whereas like Chablis, you're going to pay twice.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Expensive Napa Cab or
Yes.
moderately priced Bordeaux?
Probably moderate price Bordeaux from the right bank.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that.
Because I'd rather drink two things with a group than one expensive bottle.
Yeah.
And I'm often disappointed by Napa unless it's old and it's from a not hot vintage.
Okay.
Too much alcohol, too much oak, just in general for my palate. Love to sell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have to go Bordeaux.
These are good.
Yeah.
So what is the favorite glass of wine you've ever had? Or, and I've asked Madeline Trevon this and she had a great answer, but death row, it's over. You have one bottle of wine you can obviously open, right? Or glass of wine. But what is your last death row or desert island? Because you're a nice guy, you'd probably never be on death row. Desert island. One bottle can be dropped from a helicopter down to you, parachuted. One bottle of wine. What is your last bottle of wine?
So it would be champagne, definitely, and it would probably be
Amen.
It would probably be the same bottle that really got me to like first close my eyes and go wow, which was 82 Salon. I was a server. I was like 21. It was one of those like kind of like crusty old dude like Food and Wine Society in this place in Chicago. They brought all their wine for lunch, and they had multiple bottles of 82 Salon, and I'm helping with wine service, learning how to open older bottles. And he's like, have a glass. And it was the first time I stuck my nose in a glass. Like I grew up around wine, drinking pretty good wine, even as like a teenager, little sips here and there with my uncle and my family in France. But that was the first time I was like, wow. Like I had no idea that wine could, and that's what's so great about champagne because it's the five senses, right? Like you can even hear it, if you stick your ear to the glass.
God, it's beautiful. Doesn't it make you want champagne so bad?
Yeah.
I was going to bring some, but I didn't know if I could keep it cold
82
enough.
Salon, you could absolutely bring
No.
this.
I trust me. I don't even know where I would find that. You'd have to go on.
If anyone has any 82 Salon, please FedEx it to Delisi, Essential Cooking, WDT Studios.
Yeah.
We will reconvene for that.
So, I don't know if that would be the bottle, but like if I had to pick one bottle, the bottle that got me that much into it where I would go, wow, because I was on a different career path. I mean, I was in restaurants forever, grew up around food and wine, but I was on my way to medical school. I was actually 6 months away when I decided to go back into the restaurant business.
Yeah.
But that was the one memory of my like early restaurant career that made me go, okay, like this is something that that will get me up in the morning. I can still like kind of smell it.
Damn, clearly.
Yeah.
What do you think? So let's say somebody out there is like an open-minded person, average American, walking the earth that's like indifferent to wine. What do you think? I mean, because mine is, I want to say champagne, but what do you think is the one wine that you would say, like, what is the one worm on the hook for the average American walking the earth where you're like, wine's cool, man, you'll like it. And they're like, okay, prove it. What's the one thing you're pouring? What is the worm on the hook of the wine world to the average American?
I would probably say some sort of rosé from Provence. Because I think it's not just a glass of wine; it also sparks a conversation. Because I still, even as our level of knowledge and the customer base, and I I guess the general interest in wine as it evolves, people still think that pink wine is sweet.
Yeah,
right.
good point.
And so you can pour like especially structured Provence rosé that can age.
Yeah.
In that right window. I mean, you can serve it all year round. You could do it in December. You can do it.
Yeah, and you're talking about it's red grapes, but it's kind of to the white wine.
So you've got
palate.
structure and
That's a good point.
texture, and you've got fruit, but it could be a little bit chilled. I think the biggest thing where people get turned off with wine is bad service. Right? They're drinking white wine way too cold. They're drinking red wine way too hot. Right. Never in the middle. And if red wine's too hot or too cold, it can either it comes off as too tannic or too tannic, right? Or it doesn't smell like anything if it's too cold. So what rosé from Provence right now you think is drinking? Like, I have a soft spot in my heart for Closy Bone.
Yeah, and that's on a lot of lists.
Which is an amazing property.
That's around though. Closy Bone, you can get that at a lot of restaurants.
You can, and you can find it at pretty much any top retailer.
So Closy Bone, that's Cibonne.
Yep.
And so from Provence, France.
Right.
Obviously, it snuggles with the border of Italy. I think that if we can make a trade, I think Italy should take Provence because it's the best part of France, in my opinion. But
hey, it's all been
I know.
There's been a borders shift.
There's a thin border.
Right.
But that's a good. So Closy Bone rosé right now available in a lot of stores. What temperature would you serve it at?
So I would treat it more like a serious white wine, probably like 45.
Yeah,
and
so
then let it warm up, and don't be afraid to decant either.
Okay.
Like a good decanter that can hold just a bottle of wine. Just pulling the cork, pouring it into the decanter can wake up the wine,
Nice.
like you wouldn't believe, and it can also warm it up pretty quickly. So if it's a little bit too cold,
so put it in the fridge overnight. You pull it out dinner the next day. You pour it into a decanter. You can even pour it into like a water pitcher. You don't have to go buy a decanter.
Yeah, it doesn't. Have
And
to be
just kind of swoosh it around a little bit.
Yep.
Pour it in your glass, and if you let it sit for probably honestly 3 minutes, it's probably at that 45 degrees.
Yep.
So if anybody others that's listening wants to get into wine, Closy Bone rosé, 45 degrees, decant it a little bit, close your eyes, put it to your lips. If you don't like it, there's no hope for you.
Well, especially if you have a party of 6, forget the decanter. Just pour pour everybody 4 ounces, and everybody's going to be happy.
But there's a reason why that bottle of wine is on a ton of lists around town. We've carried it a bunch.
Yeah, it's one of those wines that we think rosé, we think Memorial Day to Labor Day. It's like that doesn't work.
Like white pants,
right? Is that still a rule? I don't know. I mean, I don't wear a lot of white pants.
What is it, man?
It's still a rule.
Okay, it's still a rule.
It's still a
talk
rule.
about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we have bigger things and more important things to think about. But
right.
I would
it's
agree.
Still apparently a rule.
Yeah. What about pink pants in after Labor Day?
Pink pants and white wine. That's what you go to.
There you go.
Pink pants all year round.
Yeah.
Pink pants.
Pink
are
pants
good.
and rosé all year round.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you
This
very
is
much.
great.
Cheers,
And
you guys.
thank you for the wine. Cheers,
Yeah,
indeed.
Absolutely. Do you want another?
I'll have another little splash. Thank you. Our thanks to Antoine Przekop for joining us, to you for listening.
And we would like to thank La Marca Prosecco for their support. From the hills of Veneto, Italy, you can never go wrong with Prosecco, whether it's in a spritz or drinking straight.
Joan Isabella is our executive producer, with producer David Lyons. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Sam Bobian. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. This is a production of WDET, Detroit's NPR station.